I had always believed that family gatherings were meant to be occasions of warmth, laughter, and shared memories. Yet, the family reunion that summer turned out to be a turning point I never anticipated. Growing up, I was the middle child in a family of 5. My elder brother, Ahmed, was the golden boy, top of his class, star athlete, and later, a successful engineer. My younger sister, Aisha, was the apple of everyone's eye, with her charm and wit. I, on the other hand, was the quiet one, often lost in my thoughts, scribbling poems and stories in my worn-out notebook. My father, a stern man with high expectations, had always been vocal about his pride in Ahmed and Aisha. Their achievements were his trophies, displayed proudly in conversations with relatives and friends. My creative pursuits, however, were dismissed as mere hobbies, distractions from what he considered real success. The reunion was held at our ancestral home, a sprawling estate that echoed with the laughter of cousins, uncles, and aunts. As the evening sun cast a golden hue over the garden, my father stood up to make a toast. "I want to take a moment," he began, raising his glass, "to express how proud I am of my children. Ahmed, with his groundbreaking projects, and Aisha, with her remarkable achievements in journalism. They've made me the proudest father." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the gathered crowd, before settling on me. "And then there's Zain," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Still chasing dreams, writing stories no one reads. A loser, really." A hush fell over the gathering. The clinking of glasses ceased, and all eyes turned to me. My heart pounded, and a lump formed in my throat. The humiliation was palpable. Without a word, I stood up, my chair scraping against the stone floor, and walked away from the gathering. The murmurs and whispers faded as I made my way to the edge of the garden, where the old oak tree stood, a silent witness to many of my childhood musings. Leaning against the tree, I let the tears flow. The pain wasn't just from my father's words but from years of feeling unseen, unacknowledged. I had always hoped that one day he would understand, would see value in my passion. That night, I packed my bags and left the ancestral home, vowing never to return until I had proven my worth, not to him, but to myself. The night I left, I felt as though my world had shattered. Not just because of the humiliation I endured at the reunion, but because the man I had looked up to all my life, the one I had always hoped would see me for who I truly was, had turned his back on me so easily. It wasn't just a rejection of my career, it was a rejection of everything I believed I was worth. I packed my belongings in a daze, not knowing where to go or what to do next. My childhood home, filled with memories of the family I once thought was mine, now felt like a foreign place. I had to escape, to breathe, to heal. So, I left. I ended up in a small town a few hours away, finding a cheap room in a motel. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. The walls were bare, the furniture old, but it became my sanctuary. I lived in a haze of uncertainty, throwing myself into my writing as a means of distraction. At first, my freelance career was barely enough to keep the lights on. My laptop became my constant companion, and I spent hours every day honing my craft, copywriting, blogging, editing, trying to get my foot in the door of an industry that seemed so far out of reach. The pay was miserable, but it was all I had. I wrote every day, often writing about my experiences growing up in a family that didn't understand me. I poured my frustrations, my hopes, and my dreams into my work. But no one was listening. It wasn't until I self-published a collection of short stories, most of which were personal reflections of my struggle, that things began to change. It was a quiet start. No grandiose launch, no big promotion, just a small group of readers who stumbled upon my work online. But then something unexpected happened. One of my stories went viral. It was about a young man trying to carve his path in the world, despite the pressure from his family to follow a prescribed life. It resonated with so many people, especially those who, like me, had been labeled as failures by their loved ones. The feedback flooded in. I received dozens of emails from readers who thanked me for sharing a story that felt like their own. But what struck me most was an email from an influential blogger who had written a piece about my work, calling it a modern classic that speaks to the struggles of the unheard. That moment changed everything. I didn't just want to write anymore. I wanted to make a difference. I started reaching out to other authors, to literary agencies, to anyone who might help me take my passion to the next level. I didn't care about fame. I didn't care about fortune. I cared about using my voice to inspire others who felt as small, as insignificant, as I had felt all those years. Within a year, my second novel was picked up by a well-known publisher. It wasn't just a success, it was the success. The book climbed the charts, and within months, it was a bestseller in 3 countries. The recognition felt surreal. I was finally being seen, not by my father, but by the world. But the true turning point came when I received an invitation to speak at a literature festival in London. It was an honor I never imagined, but it also represented a full circle. I had spent years hiding in the shadows, watching as others got the recognition I believed I deserved. Now, I was invited to share my story on a stage, just a middle child, just a dreamer, but with a voice that commanded attention. The night before the event, I sat alone in my hotel room, staring at the words on the page. I was a far cry from the person I had been when I left my family, a far cry from the boy who was labeled a loser by the one person I had longed to impress. My phone buzzed, and I picked it up absent-mindedly. It was a message from Aisha. Zane. Dad had a stroke. He's in the hospital. I know things have been broken, but he's been asking about you. I sat there in stunned silence. The man who had called me a loser, the one who had turned his back on me in front of the entire family, he was asking for me? The thought made me freeze. I wanted to ignore it, to keep walking forward without looking back. But something inside me stirred. Something told me this was a call I couldn't ignore. The next day, I made my way to the hospital. I wasn't sure if I was ready to see him, to confront the man who had dismissed my entire existence with a few hurtful words. But I knew I had to. For closure. For healing. Walking into his hospital room felt surreal. The room smelled of antiseptic and stale air. My father, once strong and imposing, now lay weak and frail in the bed. His skin was pale, his body thinner than I remembered. The years of neglect had caught up to him, just as they had caught up to me. But there was a quiet sadness in his eyes, an emotion I hadn't seen in years. Zane, he said, his voice barely a whisper. You came. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't sure if I was angry, relieved, or just plain confused. I simply nodded, unsure of what kind of interaction we were supposed to have. The silence between us was thick, heavy with all the years of unspoken words. I've been reading your books, he continued. Aisha sent them to me. Your story, the one about the middle child. That was me, wasn't it? I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. The emotions were still too raw, too fresh. But I nodded, finally speaking. It was all of us, I said quietly. But yes, it was especially me. My father looked at me, his eyes filling with tears. I didn't know. I didn't understand. I thought I was doing what was best for you. I thought I was pushing you to be better. But I see now. I see now that I hurt you. I'm sorry, Zane. I really am. I looked at him, feeling a strange mixture of sorrow and relief. It's okay, I said softly. I've forgiven you. But I had to leave to find myself. And I did. We sat in silence for a long while, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was just real. For the first time in years, I felt like we were both human, no longer father and son, just two people who had gone through their own struggles and come out the other side. It was a beginning, not an end. 2 years later. Things had changed between us. I still didn't agree with everything he did, but I understood him more than I ever had. Our relationship was no longer defined by expectations or disappointments, it was defined by respect and shared understanding. I continued to grow my writing academy, The Quiet Voice, which had expanded to mentor hundreds of young storytellers. The academy was about more than just teaching writing, it was about giving a platform to those who, like me, had been silenced for far too long. I wanted to help others find their voice, to show them that they, too, could rise from being labeled a loser to being someone who mattered. At our last graduation ceremony, I looked out over the room. I saw the faces of young people who had come to me broken, unsure of their worth, and who were now leaving with their heads held high. Then, as I took the stage, I saw my father in the front row, clapping with pride. He stood up as I was called to the podium, and his applause echoed louder than anyone else's. His face was soft, his eyes filled with genuine pride. It was the kind of moment I had always longed for. But this time, it wasn't just about me, it was about all of us. He had grown, too. When I met his gaze, I saw something I hadn't seen before, a deep, unwavering pride. And it was no longer about him. It was about us. Sometimes, the hardest lessons come from the most unexpected places. And the greatest growth often follows the deepest wounds. My journey, though painful, had led me to the truth: I was never a loser. I was just waiting for the world to see me.